Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the ongoing Afghan situation, about the peace and prosperity in the region, and we'll also be talking about the interim government that has been established yesterday, and then on top the future of this cabinet, how things will move ahead. And you know, there's a lot of hue and cry from the Western world, interestingly, about the role of women, because there is not even a single woman that has been put in that particular cabinet. But I will also remind you that even in the previous cabinet of 28 ministers, there were only 3 women. So you can well imagine, and forget about that, look at what is happening in USA, how many women are in the main cabinet, or perhaps in United Kingdom, you'll see the difference. So now things are getting really interesting because as the time is passing on, it seems that the Taliban, they have actually learned from the past. The way we see Afghan women protesting on the roads and the way they have been looked after, rather protected by the Taliban, that is something which nobody ever thought that they'll be witnessing in the future. On top, another beautiful picture somebody sent me where there was this group of girls sitting on one side, group of boys sitting on the other side in the college, and then there was a partition with a cloth sheet. And that is something which is pretty, again, very encouraging for this society. But if the West really wants to change the entire fabric of that society, I mean, that is not possible. But they have realized that the future course of action will really depend on their particular actions, because they are sort of under observation by the Western world. You pick up any Indian channel, hue and cry, that is exactly what is seen there, and maligning the Taliban. You talk about some other countries, in particular USA, and I'll also take the name of the channel, that's CNN or Fox. They are totally after them as if this was a hostile takeover by the Taliban and the previous regime, all those who ran away. There was not even any resistance other than Panjshir. Later on, they were also able to control that area. But when you talk about Afghanistan, remember 25% of the population is Tajik, around 10% is Uzbek, there are Pashtuns, there are Hazaras, there are Turkmen. So it's a very interesting mix, but there should be representation from all the sides. But perhaps this is the interim government, but in the future we'll see a different course of action. But before we introduce you to our panelists, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that, and after that we'll continue our discussion.
The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and its citizens are facing debilitating non-traditional challenges since the Taliban have taken over Afghanistan. The reluctance of the international entities in recognizing the Taliban as a legitimate political entity and the respective policies of depriving Afghan citizens of integral financial resources is pushing Afghan citizens towards a collapsing economic, health and food security situation. The European Union as well as the United States State Department has shown dissatisfaction towards newly introduced interim government of the Taliban, which is a warning sign that the World Bank and the respective institutions will remain reluctant towards financially supporting Afghanistan. Pakistan, being an immediate neighbor and a co-stakeholder in South Asia, is consistently trying to find the avenues through which the war-torn state could attain a status of a peaceful and prosperous entity with a sound socio-political mesh in the international arena. In this regard, Pakistan Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi is actively engaging the international actors and neighboring countries of Afghanistan. Pakistan Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi in these core meetings asserted that the world should accept the new reality in Afghanistan and international organizations should insightfully and pragmatically deal with Afghanistan's situation so that a looming humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan can be averted. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi in the meeting co-hosted by Germany and the United States also suggested that the foreign reserves must be unfrozen so that the citizens of Afghanistan can be protected from the horrors of food, health and personal insecurities.
Now, to talk about this, let me quickly introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio, on my right is Air Vice Marshal retired Ijaz Malik Saab, who's a senior analyst. Ijaz, a pleasure to have you on the show, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And we also have with us Bashir Wali Mohmand Saab, senior analyst. Again, needs no introduction, former DGIB. So thank you so much. And we have with us Dr. Maria Sultan, President Sassi University, senior analyst, on Skype with us. Maria, pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Now, starting off from you, AVM Saab, first of all, sir, you saw the report. Now, there are a couple of very important worries, I would say, not only from the domestic front, but from the international front also, and that is about the food security, that is about the lack of medicine, and perhaps the lack of support by all those countries. Perhaps they committed that they will look after the Afghan affairs once the change is there. But sir, it has been the opposite. $9.5 billion frozen in America. IMF has stopped their program that they were supposed to give them around $400 million. On top, I mean, whatever the Americans did before leaving, that is right in front of you. And the so-called, the Afghan leaders, including Ashraf Ghani and Amarullah Saleh, the amount of cash they had with us, you know, they just vanished. Now, in certain circumstances, sir, it seems that things will be pretty tough for the Taliban. Or do you think things are being made difficult for them on purpose?
First of all, I think that it is a sample or a reflection of what Americans and their allies, they have done in 2 decades in Afghanistan for their socio-economic uplift. What have they invested, and how have they tried to contribute to whatever stated objectives they had once they came to Afghanistan. They invested primarily in the defense forces, and the way they collapsed without even firing a bullet or offering resistance. So that was it. And now again, the Afghan people, they are, now they're looking forward for the external help to manage their day-to-day affair, for food, for their economic activities. So I think this is high time that the regional powers, they must come forward, and in this interim period where they are raising concern for food security, medicines, they should come up and they should contribute in this particular aspect.
Now, another point, sir, and that is about the visit of the Qatari Foreign Minister. Obviously, there are certain rich countries, including China, Russia, and Qatar. Iran is under sanctions. We all understand the economic situation of Pakistan, though we have always offered them help, and we will do that too. But don't you think, sir, forget about the West now. Let's focus, as you mentioned, on the countries which are the neighbors of Afghanistan, or perhaps countries like Qatar or Turkey. Do you think, sir, they are in a position to look after your affairs? For example, Qatar can have deficit payments in terms of the oil or gas, for that matter. Pakistan can provide them some food, which 3 C-130s they have landed, sir, and a lot of help has also been sent through the road. So I think that can take care of that particular issue.
First of all, Pakistan's contribution and Pakistan's sincerity towards having a broad-based government and a stable Afghanistan. Just imagine the evacuation from Kabul after Americans' departure, the way Pakistan International Airline has helped.
Unbelievable, sir.
Imagine an aerodrome where there is no radar coverage, where there is no functional air traffic control, and where there are even bullets being fired to disperse the people,
the crowd who are on the runway.
So this is a nightmare for any aircraft to even think of landing under these environments. I mean, no safety precautions or standard operating procedure would ever allow. And in this environment, you see a Pakistani flag carrier landing there, and landing there with his CEO on board. You know,
that was amazing.
Yeah, you know, I must pay
Air Marshal Arshad.
Compliment to Air Marshal Arshad that you know, his presence on board not only gave confidence to the crew, both air crew and the cabin crew, but it gave a message to the world that here we are to manifest our seriousness in Afghan people. And then, you know, they evacuated, and you know, what they did, they approached Asian Development Bank, World Bank, and these were the institutions. You know, I was just laughing once I was going through the details that probably that was the only time that IMF and World Bank, they accepted whatever Pakistan offered without, you know, any questioning, and they boarded our planes, and around 300 officials.
They were all in Islamabad, sir. So many
they
flights
were brought
to
Islamabad.
Yeah.
So and then our Prime Minister's resolve are the foreign ministers very vocal on the issue that how Pakistan views the future, both in short term and in long term, for Afghanistan being a stable neighbor that suits
I think,
us.
sir, this is what everybody has been looking forward for the last almost 40 years. Mohammed Saab, you have been actively involved in these procedures and everything ever since we heard about the Soviet Union's invasion on Afghanistan and so on and so forth. So last 40 years, do you think whatever happened recently during, let's put it this way, post the 15th of August, do you think is that the right approach and this particular approach is going to lead the way forward now? And whatever has been happening before, I mean, Afghanistan has a history, sir. Are we moving in the right direction? Are they moving in the right direction? Is the entire region now has understood that this is the way forward?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, as far as, I would say the Air Marshal Saab has already said something, but I would say we must, before considering anything with regard to Afghanistan, we must go back to their history and look at their history. The last about 2,000 to 3,000 years, they have never accepted foreign domination. Well, temporarily, as they say, it's easy to capture Afghanistan, but it is impossible, rather, to rule Afghanistan. And we have seen that. The king has killed his son. If he thought that he's not behaving, the son has killed his vice versa. So that is their history. Even in this particular case, I think our government, for a change, I would say, they really took all the steps, and it was only we who could talk to these people. Now you and my, of course, I won't throw it on you only. The Americans, for example, they didn't have the guts to talk to these people, whatever you may call them, whatever shape they are behaving or working and all that. And all these stories that we are here, this will happen, that had happened. The first Afghan was this thing. But nothing has happened. I mean, after all, there is a war going on. If the war is going on, there will be casualties.
But sir, talking about the current, the present, I mean, do you believe that whatever the interim government has at the moment, I mean, because the Western world, once again, I'll refer to that, they say that this is not an inclusive and broad-based government. And they forget about the role of the women for the moment. I mean, people from, yes, the governor of Tajik, who was always with the Taliban, remember? So the representation of the Tajik and the future of Abdullah for that matter, or Hamid Karzai, we all thought that they should be, among those. Obviously, sir, one was the CEO, then the head of a council, and the other person was the president twice. So they will not accept anything less than that. Do you think they have any role at the moment in the Afghan politics, or how do you see that?
No. I personally feel that this is silly on the part of anybody who has recommended this joker into this game. Abdullah, Karzai, we have seen them, yeah. All these people, they have come, they have ruled in different capacities. And you have brought them again, in what capacity? But I suppose, I happen to know at least these top slot, whatever you call them, the overall control to me seems it is the Haqqanis, okay? Sirajuddin Haqqani sitting there, and his brother, for example, Khalil, he was in Kabul, governor of Kabul. They've been personal, I can call them my friends, been visiting my residence and all that. These people are straight people. But we should not consider them even, they are not fools. They exactly know, as I said, for the last 2,000 years, Nobody has ruled them. Why?
Consistency, objectivity, that was there. That's why after 20 years, they're
Exact-
back in
So
power.
they exactly know how to rule, how to talk. And Jirga, I'm a Pathan myself. I know these people straight, you will think that he doesn't know the ABC of this game. But you should sit with them and then you will
And
realize.
so they have proven it. The way
For-
they negotiated with the Americans, I
Amer-
think that was
And
unbelievable.
they have done it.
Yes.
With the Americans, they have done it. And these Americans, they could not move. It is all with our courtesy that whatever has happened. And of course, our foreign minister, although I don't have something very good for him, but still, it is he. I mean, the way he
And there
traveled.
were a couple of great initiatives.
No, the way he, shuttle diplomacy between here, there. In Afghanistan, you must speak Pashto. If you can't speak Pashto, and if you go there, well, then God helps you. Okay, that is the only I can say. These are the people, they believe me. I've seen,
Right.
like, this Khalik Zadeh. Now, he's the top
Negotiator. American,
negotiator.
yeah.
And in one of the function I saw here in Islamabad, he was talking, and there were about 5, 6 Afghans sitting my right and left. And believe me, I mean, as I said, I'm Afghan, Pathan myself, but I didn't know the words which they were attributing towards that chap. So they don't like the foreign in any this thing. We have luckily, we have proven that no, we don't mean what those people. They are our brother, they are Muslims, and we should help them, which we are doing. I mean,
I think there is a great responsibility on the Pakistani part because the West believes that, we have been helping the Afghan Taliban to, be back in the power. But let me take the same point to Maria Sultan Sahiba. Dr. Sahiba, a couple of very interesting developments I'm sure you must have been following over the last 3 weeks. The fall of Kabul, later on the way the Taliban looked after the affairs, then hue and cry in the Indian media, and some protests going on, some sort of resistance in Bashir. Later on now, things are very much in control. Ma'am, when you talk about Afghanistan, when you talk about this particular juncture, what do you see ahead now? The way forward, your take.
That's a very broad question with basically no focus, but the fact is this, that that seems to be what Afghanistan is at this moment facing. There are 3 or 4 questions. First question is, of course, with regards to whether or not Afghanistan will maintain its political stability. The answer has already come. So the next step in this direction is whether or not they're going to rechange or they're going to make some method through which their governance system is going to be restructured. And in that case, we're talking about a rewriting of the Afghan constitution. How that's going to be done, that is yet to be seen. A second aspect is how is the government going to function within the current Afghan state? Because the Afghan state at this moment is at a standstill. So this needs to be clear whether it's going to be presidential form of government, whether it's going to be some other kind of government. So once this question is settled, we can look at local minorities and other minorities also perhaps moving forward in this kind of political dispensation. But one thing is for clear. This will be a Taliban-led government, and this will set the course for everything else. There are some positive developments in this because we see that as far as their security situation is concerned, it's the military commanders which have been given both the portfolios of Interior Minister as well as the Defense Minister. So that is one. Second, with regards to foreign ministry, we will see perhaps the regional countries coming forward and then trying to fill in the gap. Because what we're looking at is an economic, political, and security gap which can emerge if the regional countries do not come forward and other countries in the world do not become partners in peace for Afghanistan. Because if they don't, then we will be looking at infighting, which would perhaps be coming from various terrorist groups, which are right now present in Afghanistan. And secondly, it's also a question of mapping up the people's expectations. Now, the people's expectation is where most of the information operations and most of, the media talks have been, but they have not indicated anything substantial with regards to what exactly are they actually asking, what exactly are they expecting. One thing is for sure, neither the evacuation has been 100%. A lot of military contractors are still in ground and are still present in Afghanistan, and neither is the transformation to the new government actually complete. Henceforth, a lot of things are still in the waiting. A lot will be announced, and these announcements and these structures would perhaps pave the way for the future.
All right, now another aspect, Mary, you did mention about the infighting. I mean, looking at the current setup that has been established in Kabul, I mean, various factions, whether they're from Haqqani group or perhaps they were from the other related groups as well, I mean, they have formed an interim government. But the Western world says that, well, no women have been included, and it is not a broad-based, inclusive government as they all expect. Do you think this is just the first phase to settle down the things, and when the second phase would come, obviously there is going to be a proper, broad-based, setup where there is going to be a proper representation of the Tajiks, Uzbeks, and all?
I think they're jumping the gun over here, Faisal, because the fact of the matter is this: the Taliban did not come forward as a result of the election process. They came forward as a result of a negotiated settlement with the Americans and the American armed forces in particular, when it comes to actual power brokers within the American administration. So this is not an election-oriented win which they've got. This is a military win which is translating into an effective political win for them. So that's number one. Number two, in a transition government, it's never possible that you have a coup. If I were to put it in another place, it means that you would have a military coup, and in that military coup, you have actually everybody who is got whatever issues that you make them an inclusive approach. That was never going to happen. So any expectations on that account are, number one, far from ground. Number two, will not be based on reality, and number three, would have yielded no results. Number three, the fact that the drive towards Kabul has also been negotiated. We did not see a lot of fighting, a lot of resistance by other partners. So this basically means some level of negotiation did occur. Now that basically means intra-Afghan dialogue happened. The only difference is that intra-Afghan dialogue did not happen with the so-called suspects of those leaders who were claiming to represent every minority and every different ethnic group within Afghanistan with the Taliban. Because if there was no negotiated settlement, there would have been a lot of infighting. There were a lot of militias there. They would have, we wouldn't have seen such a smooth transition towards the takeover of Kabul. So that is for sure. Negotiations have occurred. Who are the commanders-in-chief of those people? That is to be witnessed. And that will only come through once the Afghan constitution, the new government structure, and the mechanism becomes clear. Only then you will come to know what kind of inclusivity we are talking about, what will be the government structure, what will be the financial structure for it, what will be the security structure, what will be the economics of all this design. This is not clear at this moment. So this expectation that it has to be according to a standard which was set by international community is going to be negotiated, because as we see and as what the Taliban have said, that half of their council is still on the US sanctions list, it's on the US terrorist list as well. So on the other hand, if you're asking for inclusivity and you're asking for lots of things of those people who you think are representing, and those people who had been part of the power broking process earlier, then a lot will need to be negotiated. And I think that will come through negotiations, but in terms of actual broad-based ethnic representation, that may come forward, but the mechanism and the metric which they will choose is yet to be cleared. It could be a Swiss kind of an approach. It could be an Iranian approach where there is a Rahbari Council and that continues. But what will be the structure? It's not clear. It will only be clear once the new government is formed on 11th of September.
So it is about, the time we need to see in the right perspective. Now, sir, another important story, and that is about, one is about the, a talk between the CIA chief and the Chief of Army Staff. And the second was another very important statement by Mr. Blinken, that we can work with the Afghan government. So that means that they still want to, keep some sort of a hold there in Afghanistan. It is not that they won't be having any role now. And secondly, sir, do you think the way the Americans have always looked at Pakistan through the lens of Afghanistan, is that phenomena going to continue, sir, or do you think now the Americans need to be very straight to us and we need to be straight to them, that this is 2 + 2 now, which is going to be 4?
Unfortunately, once we talk to Americans on any issue, and I personally had the opportunity to talk to their higher leadership at Pentagon and the State Department. Whenever we raise our concern on some regional issues, they would always tell us that don't look through Indian prism to talk. You talk straight to us what you need or what you want to negotiate with Pakistan versus the USA, and do not bring the Indian factor in it. But quite conversely, whenever Americans, they want to deal with this region, India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, the subcontinent, they always first of all give the due cushion to the Indian interest, and they always, it's not only the Afghan prism or Afghan filter that they apply towards Pak-US relation, it is broadly speaking an Indian filter and a very thick, because I have personally seen the think tanks and the policy makers in Washington and now even in the government, they are of the Indian origin. And there was a time with Dr. Condoleezza Rice, there was an undersecretary, a Sikh origin Indian lady.
Nikki Haley.
And now Nikki Haley. Even at that time.
And the vice president now.
And she was the lady who actually was responsible for the term which was coined as FPAC, that we very strongly objected that you are trying to hyphenate us with Afghanistan, which was the problem at that time, and we were the solution or a major partner to a solution. So how can you hyphenate a problem with a solution? So then they they had to withdraw forcefully. So I believe that Americans, they want to have some kind of an engagement and some kind of inroads, whatever setup would emerge, because their definite interest is not only Pakistan, but the rising Russia, rising China in this region. So they would like to have some inroads into the people or into the intelligentsia.
Sir, when there is a clash of interest or clash of narrative for that matter, obviously China has an expansion plan, everyone knows. Russia has its own concerns, and everybody is eyeing at the Central Asian side, and then the route always up into the European side or otherwise in the Middle East, when you talk about BRI in the larger context. So sir, if there is such a conflict of interest for that matter, that the Americans are telling us not to be a part of CPAC or withdraw yourself, or they've been constantly pushing the Indians to stay away from it, though technically speaking, as far as the economy is concerned, I think all the major economic stakeholders in India really want to be a part of it. It's the government that is primarily the major hurdle. So, do you think this conflict of interest would remain there, sir? Obviously, this is the bone of contention.
Yes, it would remain. Actually, you see, we are going to have, the 20th, so to say, anniversary of 9/11, and how world has so quickly changed in last 20 years. America, which was emerging as a sole superpower, a unipolar world, and then a new world order, and now within just a short span of 20 years, we see that the world is not going to be the same.
Multipolar.
Multipolar, with two arch rivals of USA emerging as the regional. If they
don't, the Russians and the Chinese, they have a historic connection.
Exactly. So I think America has to play their cards very wisely now, because they do not radiate that kind of influence now, and with China getting involved in the reconstruction process or in the economic uplift, I think they would have better credibility as compared to...
Because they actually believe in the real development.
Exactly.
The socio-economic aspect.
Exactly. You just see, in the last 20 years, while America was, spending billions and ultimately which came out the figures of trillions, in waging a war which brought them no result. It is back to scale.
They were humiliated at the end of the day.
It proved to be another Vietnam for them. And in those previous 20 years, what China was doing, after China, had completed their own, developmental phase of economy, they were doing the one road, one belt, one road initiative and BRI, and investing heavily in this entire region for the development of the region and of their own people. how many millions of people have been, raised below, who were below the poverty level in China. Whereas on the other side in America, what we have seen in the last change of government and what we saw.
Forget about that, sir. 100-year-old underground, the system, the railway system, and it was all exposed during these reigns. China has developed post 1980, and it's a very modern country as compared to United States of America. That is going to be the real issue. So I'll just come back to you on that.
Okay.
But Bashir Wali Mohammed Saab, Afghanistan has always been a test case. Not once, not twice, not thrice, God knows how many times, starting from the Kublai Khan and Genghis Khan and all. Now, sir, and Afghanistan has always been called the heart of Asia. But the heart of Asia always had some sort of a problem, sir. The issue is now that now things have settled down, but a lot of analysts, a lot of critics rather, they believe that the problem will remain there. It might be a temporary phase, things have settled down, but the infighting or the issues like the non-state actors present, whether you call about TTP or you talk about I'm you or you talk about the concern of the Chinese. Yes, how many fronts are there basically, to look after by the Taliban, and especially when they're engaging with the countries? I think this is going to be a mega challenge for them also, and they do understand. Now, this particular juncture is very important for Pakistan and for most of these countries, sir, in the region. People talk about CASA 1000, people talk about TAPI, and there's so much more that you could have done actually 20 years ago, but that was stopped for a certain reason. Now, sir, do you think the economic uplift is the way forward, or the military strength is going to settle the score? What should be the way forward for the Afghan government and the people? Because there seems to be some sort of a disconnect between the people living in the urban areas as compared to the people living in the rural areas. And then those living in the urban areas, especially the women, they have got some legitimate concerns as well. Will they be met, sir?
Well, I would say that as far as this Western, you have talked a lot. Air Marshal has also contributed and all that. Well, I don't know why the people are so worried about an issue or a country that, that it doesn't affect them directly. If we say something, we have a ground. Look at this, right from not Chatral, Brol, which is sharing the border with the Soviet Union on one side, with the China in other side, and then it starts downward. All these 6 are, they are no more, they say. Practically, no, it hasn't happened, but it is still the same tribal belt. Well, the people of that area, we must read their mind. I keep saying anywhere that I go that for God's sake, don't poke your nose where you are not supposed to. Now the American, whatever you have said, millions and billions of dollars and all that, what happened to that million and trillion dollar? Just one.
They had the most corrupt governments, sir, throughout.
Exactly.
The money vanished.
The moment we went, let me tell you, the first Taliban, this thing, host, for example, I'll just take one. Probably the Air Marshal would be knowing more because he's the Air Force. But I was physically there on the ground. When we went to host, I just was a spectator. I had nothing to do. Whatever I was supposed to do, I was doing it, but not in the manner that probably people expect. On the ground, believe me, there were 27 aircrafts, 27 aircrafts, which were, I think, just within a week's time, the people of host or the troops in host were using only they were using the toilets of those 27 aircraft. That is what the poverty. You just go even now to Kabul, and our emphasis are more probably towards the urbanized. The people, the Afghans that we see, they are the urban people mostly. They are not the rural area. But the people who matter,
They're from the urban, rural side.
they are from that side. And what has happened this time, you know, it is the rural. They have come up. And as, you know, apprehension, well, this will happen, that will happen, and all that stuff. Yes, whenever there is, we have seen all these, what happened in France, what European countries you just take, it has happened. So if something happens in Afghanistan, well, it's not something very special. The West, the Indians, I was just, although I don't watch that TV normally, by nature maybe that I'm brought up that way, but that he was talking all rubbish about Afghanistan. And okay, Afghanistan, where they have also sunk lot of money, but that money was the American money. It was indirectly funneled through them. It has gone. Today, I think day before or it's 2 days, somebody came who deals with the currency. So I asked him. He said, "No, we are okay. Nothing has changed. For us, nothing has changed." And these people are, they are far better soldiers than their, you know, predecessor, the Taliban in the past. Well, they had not seen that thing. They were rough dealing, and these people are
They're educated. They speak
as you
well,
are,
and they understand. Yes, sir.
yes, these people are very.
All right. Now, Dr. Maria Sultan, couple of questions for you. One, the future of Afghanistan from a very different perspective. Now, earlier we all thought that, you know, rather forget about the non-state actors. My concern is about the safety of Pakistan. They have said that, you know, they will not let their, you know, whosoever, whether it's the IS factor or the TTP or perhaps the other non-state actors. Now, the question is, ma'am, the safety of Pakistan comes first. Our DGISI was there, sir. And then on top, it seems that Pakistani engagement is very fruitful. Ma'am, now the role of Pakistan for the next couple of years, if the Taliban are able to have a stable government there. And secondly, how would it affect the Pak-US relationship? Your take on that.
First of all, Pakistan-US relationship is not just purely linked to Pakistan-Afghan relations. It has got its own dynamics, though for the recent past it has been focused on Afghanistan as a key factor, and that's one of the major reasons that they lumped us together as AFPAC. Now, that said, it is extremely important for us that the Afghan government and the Afghan state retain its capability, because if they do not retain its capability, then there is going to be a very big power vacuum, and then the question will be, who will control Afghanistan? One thing is for sure, the world is engaged in the last 20 years in fighting a war in Afghanistan and failed. So if this government does not work and this state is unable to perform its current level or current status of work, then we are talking about a failed state in all its connotations, with no leadership, with no people who are vested in making it work in a pragmatic fashion. And in that case, it will not just be a question of Pakistan's stability or Pakistan's security, it would be a question of regional security, and it will be a question of international security. So Pakistan's role has been very clear. We have very clearly stated that we would want the Afghan state and the Afghan government to act as a peace broker for the future power dispensation in Afghanistan, one. Number two, to ensure that the government retains its functions at the current level in which the state has been performing. And number three, to provide some economic opportunities and security opportunities for the future. Because if they fail to do so, then we are talking about a real disaster in which not only the region would be destabilized, but global politics would also be affected, because the method and the manner in which the Americans have left Afghanistan has also created a bigger issue with regards to the fact that the initial objectives which they had laid down for themselves, that is establishing the war against terrorism to be a key factor, and then also ensuring that there is no terrorism emanating from Afghanistan, has not been the case once they have left. There is a UN Security Council report which says that there is Ijaz there. There is a UN Security report which continues to say that there are other regional terrorist organizations, including ETIM, including TTP, and so on and so forth. So there are bigger question marks which are linked to the governance of Afghanistan, and for an effective power broker in Kabul, which is able to manage all areas of Afghanistan. Only then we would be talking about a secure Afghanistan and a secure Pakistan.
Maria, another important factor, now that is very, very, important, but a lot of people do not understand, or perhaps they don't want to talk about it, is that when you look at the demographics of Afghanistan, 70% of their population, perhaps their youth, well under the age of 25. And most of those were born post 9/11 incident. Now, these youngsters, whether boys or girls, they're used to using the internet, the mobile phones, and they have had a very different life. But certainly there was this change in the regime. And most of these youngsters are reacting also. I was listening to a couple of interviews, the media was taking when they were having a protest. Do you think the current government or this concept of the Taliban will be an adverse factor, or do you think the Taliban have changed enough to also settle them down? Because that is going to be, you can't change the culture overnight, Maria. And they've been like that for the last 20 years. I mean, the youngster, the youth I'm talking about, forget about the history and the past of Afghanistan. Talking about the present, the way the world has changed, obviously Afghanistan has changed as well.
Well, Faisal, the real question is, has Afghanistan really changed? Because the people you're talking about are from what, 25% of Afghanistan, which means only 4 major cities. That means Herat, Kandahar, Kabul, and Mazar-e-Sharif. So other than that, and out of that, only a very small amount have actually made it to the educational system, and very small amount of them have been so-called emancipated. Let's not forget, the Taliban do represent a genuine distrust which the people and the rest of the country who thought that they were invisible in this war against terrorism for the last 20 years actually sided with them. The fact remains that the Taliban have not just, got their grassroots support from nowhere. The fact that they fought a 20-year war means that there was a lot of local support, which allowed these people to function despite the fact that $2 trillion were spent, despite the fact that 49 countries were there, despite the fact there was NDS, despite the fact that there was an Afghan national army of more than 400,000. This indicates that whatever artificial structures you produce, no matter what level of development you take forward, if it is not indigenously owned and it is not representative, you can't have Afghanistan through the eyes of the green zone. Because if that is what Afghanistan you've actually left, then we wouldn't have had the Taliban today. The fact is this, that there is an Afghanistan which exists beyond the green zone. There's an Afghanistan which exists beyond the 25%. That basically means 75% of Afghanistan. So that is the Afghanistan which is right now standing with the Taliban. That is the Afghanistan which needs change, and that is the Afghanistan which is hoping for change. And that is the Afghanistan which has been tribal, cultural, and the power base of most of the Taliban. Now, in this case, we need to be very clear that where do you reconcile the perception of Afghanistan coming on Twitter space and Instagram and the Afghanistan which exists on ground, and what exactly is the world, and for that matter, the global responsibility towards the Afghan people. Everybody has talked fancy words, but look at the evacuation process. We saw people, I'm very impressed that we have got an air marshal who has been talking about how safely Pakistan evacuated. But the fact of the matter is, what was the corresponding picture which we had? We had a corresponding picture in which the US Air Force aircraft C-17 Globemaster actually ran over live people, so-called those people who had aided and supported the United States, threw them from the aircraft up above thousands of miles, and then their designers trying to show this as Afghanistan skydiving incidences and then putting it forward. This is the human rights which we saw. We are looking at, for the first time, images of what happened in Parwan facility. We're looking at what was the jails looking like in Bagram. So I think there is those people also who were just picked up like animals, shipped off to Guantanamo Bay, and some of them were just shipped off to Parwan facility and others without having any access to extra, without having any access to legal jurisdiction. So the Taliban at the moment are representing a certain form of justice system. They are representing maybe perhaps a primal instinct as far that is concerned. But that said, the fact remains that you have to see how much the new state and the old state and the new Taliban and the old Afghan state is able to reconcile to become actually a power-giving institution to the rest of the people of Afghanistan. If they manage to do so, then it will be a truly transformative point for Afghanistan. Yes, it may not be culturally as avid as it was under Ashraf Ghani, but the fact remains that you do need to be representative of the country which you are trying to govern. So if this is what the Taliban managed to do, then I think they've done the job well. Because if they don't care for the people, and that means the majority, the invisible people, then what are we actually talking about? So these fancy talks about whether they can actually live up to it or not doesn't really hold true when we look at the security and ground realities of Afghanistan.
All right, Maria, one last minute comment, and that is about the Indian role. Do you think that has been eroded, diminished, or perhaps you believe that it's been eliminated now to a certain level where, I mean, now things would be under control? Because earlier, whatever we witnessed and the way the Indian media is behaving, it's unbelievable. It's even funny.
Well, fact is this, Faisal, that they have been challenged. They had a plan A. The plan A was to control NDS. The plan A was to have these 17 consulates. And the plan A was to continue using Afghanistan as a terror base for creating terror incidences in Pakistan and other regional countries. This was plan A. It was working perfectly well, and that is one of the major reasons that one of the century's biggest intelligence failure happened in Afghanistan. And they could not come to know that everybody negotiated the peace, which the Afghan government's administration was unaware of. And secondly, the second plan B was Panjshir, where they thought that the NDS chief has gone there along with Amrullah being there along with him, Bismillah, and with his 7,000 fighters, they would be able to retain that. So after that fall, where the people of Panjshir actually aided and supported the Taliban and provided the necessary intel, we see a lot of frustration in India. Yes, they have been challenged. Yes, they don't know where to put their sources. And let's not forget that has their plans changed? No. Will their projects close immediately? No. Yes, they will go to ground actors such as local Afghans who are working for them. It will go to the Afghan National Army, which they've trained. It will go to the Afghan intelligence agents which they train, which is actually totally, dissolved themselves within the Afghan population. So unless until we can't
interesting times ahead,
it will be a question mark, and the threat will remain.
All right. Thank you so much, Maria, for your comments. AVM Saab, it was a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Mohmand Saab, always good to have you on the show. So thank you so much. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you tomorrow, inshallah, at 8. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.